Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. For only the second time in the 20-year history of this show, I'm going to step away from my role as host and allow someone else to ask the questions. Book 2 of my Will Wilder Adventures series, Will Wilder, The Lost Staff of Wonders, hits bookstores everywhere on Tuesday, March 7th. Tonight, I've invited author, blogger, and editor of CatholicMom.com, Lisa Hendey, to interview me about the book. So with that, I turn it over to Lisa Hendey. Now, it's your show for the next few minutes.
Every viewer's dream, the chance to interview Raymond Arroyo. Is this a first?
No, it's not a first. Only Dean Koontz has done this before.
Oh, well, my goodness, I'm
so
in
you are in
territory.
That's right. You are in
Well,
good
Mr. Arroyo, congratulations on the publication of Will Wilder 2.
Thank you.
The Lost Staff of Wonders. It's such an, as a Will Wilder fan, I can tell you that I've been anxiously awaiting the drop of the book.
Oh,
you know, this book is getting such great reviews already, and Booklist has called it exciting. Comparing it to such greats as Indiana Jones, the Percy Jackson series. So how's this book different from those?
Well, I'll tell you how it's different. My series doesn't revolve around mythology as the Rick Riordan Percy Jackson series does, or you know, Indiana Jones. Really, he went around the world collecting these artifacts. In my book, you're dealing with real artifacts and real relics that you can find in libraries, in museums, in churches all over the world. I liked that idea. The other thing that's rare in children's literature, except for your Time Traveler series, is that it is a family adventure. Right. You have an intact family that goes on the adventure with Will. His great Aunt Lucille, his mother, his father, his siblings, his friends. I've always been bothered by the idea that in so much middle grade literature, which is that beautiful age between like 8 and 14, so many of these adventures are orphans or abandoned children sort of running off on their own to take on the world. Not only is that dangerous, it's kind of silly. I like the idea of having mentors that at times frustrate and at times help Will to further his ends. But we all need that, and that tension. I love the tension of that. That family sometimes is needed to give you perspective and guidance, and sometimes they don't understand what's happening. And they grow in understanding as well when you go on an adventure together. That seems to me the nature of family.
I love that Will is imperfect.
Is he imperfect?
That we see him in the first book kind of develop and discover his gift, and maybe sometimes even fight a little bit against it.
Bet.
And so I'm wondering, is there a little bit of Raymond and Will, and is Perilous Falls a place that maybe is close to your heart in the real world?
It's very close to my heart. It is. Will, I always tell people, Will's mischievousness, Will's sense of daring has a lot to do with me as a child. I was that kid. But some of his personality, some of the reactions he has, I picked that up from children I knew in school, from my own children. And then I watch a lot. I mean, as I do school visits, you watch, you see the interaction, the relationship kids have. And that type of kid, you know, there's that boy who kind of marches to his own drummer. That's Will. I mean, he's wearing his pith helmet, and he's kind of, going on his adventures, and he's wearing his red high tops. He's just got his own thing going. And that's attractive to some kids, and to others, he's a nerd. But really, he's the most important kid in town. And he's only becoming aware of how important he is. But that comes with the requisite fears and trepidation that we all experience as we're growing up. And I like that he doesn't have all the answers, that he makes big mistakes. That's part of, I think, growing up. And I didn't want this perfect Pollyanna protagonist at the center of an adventure. That's not a fun adventure to me. I always like the kind of flawed hero, and Will Wilder is that to me.
I have to talk to you a little bit about your process, because in consuming these books and reading them, and in the audio process, especially with having voiced the audio characters, there are just these very kind of high action scenes, and I'm wondering, were you surprised that this came out of your imagination, and how does that scenery develop?
I spend a lot of time outlining, so I'm looking for those moments, and I know, I mean, I'm the author of the book. I'm also the audience of the book initially, like you. You know this. You're a stand-in for the audience. So I'm looking for moments that are going to be dramatic, revealing, and it's a balancing act. What I love about these books is I have mothers who read them. I have aunts. I have uncles. I have boys. I have girls. It's a cross-spectrum and cross-generation that have sort of embraced the first book, which I didn't really expect. I mean, I wrote it for that middle-grade audience with an eye. I mean, there's material here that no kid is going to get. That's, you know, it's going to lie in wait for them for when they return to it as adults. But I love the idea that they've all embraced it for different reasons, but that engine, the engine of the plot, what Will wants in each book, the stakes have to be really high to keep my attention. And so I love those action sequences. They usually open with a big flashback to Jacob Wilder, Will's great-grandfather.
Yes.
And I like those kind of big concept action moments that set up the whole book. You find out where the particular relic that Will's going to be dealing with in the next 300 pages, where it came from, what its source is, and how it entered the family museum at the center of Perilous Falls, and why it's important. And so but it's a challenge. You know the challenge of this as a writer.
Absolutely.
You've got to do all the
there's
research.
action, but there's also this meticulous attention to a little bit of theology, definitely to history,
Absolutely.
to accuracy. You know, in this particular second book, we're looking at the lost staff of wonders, the staff of Moses, and we reference back to in the prologue to the Ark of the Covenant to Ethiopia, to the previous adventure. So, talk a little bit about why the placement of such historical artifacts and theological context within an action-adventure story and how kids are gravitating towards that in that way.
My thought always, and it's partially from growing up in a place like New Orleans, history is never dead. History is the future and it is the past. And if you don't know it, as Tobias Shin, who's one of Will's mentors, says in the first book, if you don't know your past, you'll never discover your future, Mr. Wilder. And that, to me, is kind of the spine of the whole series. The decisions of our grandparents and great-grandparents, our mother, our father, they do light our path. They do determine, in part, our future. And you have to understand that. So I love the touchstones of history. And part of this is a cry for parents, for families, for kids to be aware that there's this history within reach. And what I love is the relics and artifacts, most of them in the books, you can go find. And I get pictures. Kids send me pictures on Twitter, or they email me pictures. They go to a museum and they see something I mentioned in the book. Look, I got it. I'm going to get in and go wherever. Look, a sarcophagus. Can I travel with this? In this book, the staff of Moses, as you said, is the central relic. What I realized is Moses' brother Aaron's staff was in the Ark of the Covenant. So I knew I had to work that in and somehow get the two staffs in this story. Well, when I started doing research, a friend of mine in Canada had been to Axum, Ethiopia. And I had read about this, but there is a very peculiar Orthodox quasi-Jewish order of monks who claim to be in possession of the Ark of the Covenant. They have claimed this for thousands of years. There is a guardian, a single monk whose life's work is to protect the Ark of the Covenant. It's in a caged-off chapel. He is the only one who has access to it. So I loved the idea of that. I did a lot of research on it. And the whole history of Axum, the Queen of Sheba went to Jerusalem. She and King Solomon got together. This is how, according to the monks, the Ark of the Covenant makes its way to Ethiopia with the Queen of Sheba and her son. It's a fascinating history. And like the staff of Moses, the reason this all came up, I was reading an article in a British paper from a professor who claimed the staff of Moses is in a museum in Birmingham, England, not Birmingham, Alabama. And now there's another museum in Istanbul that claims the staff of Moses as well. Now, personally, after doing a lot of research, I don't think either of these are credible. However, I loved the idea that you could go and look under glass and there might be the staff of Moses. So I did a lot of research on it. I went back to the Jewish Midrash and found all kinds of fascinating things about the staff. It was supposedly made of sapphire. People forget Moses pulled it from his from his father-in-law's garden. That's how he claimed his wife, which is the archetype for King Arthur, pulling Excalibur from the stone. So we owe a lot to Moses' staff.
And to the Bible and the Old Testament,
Right.
so rich in imagery that could create these beautiful stories.
Yeah.
So storytelling and going out and being with children in schools. Now you have this initiative, Storyinted,
Yeah.
and I'd love to hear a little bit more about the school visits that you're making, the visits with readers, and how children are receiving this beautiful work that
It
you
has
do.
been incredible for me and unexpected. I mean, as you know, I've written for adults, I've spoken to
Right.
groups. There is nothing like a child and watching a child open your book and get lost in a world that you created and help make, because you only do half the job. They do the other half. But a child absorbs these characters. They don't read about a character. They become that character. And that's the big thing I've learned. They are so invested in Will, in his world, in the other characters. They want to go on an adventure. And isn't that true of all of us, but particularly the young? They want to go on that adventure of life. They want to go on that adventure, that next vacation. They are so in it. And these books have sort of, I think, awakened that imagination, a sense of history for them. And we were in New Orleans. We gave a copy of the first book when it first released to St. Stephen's School in New Orleans. And then I recently went back and we gave them the second. And the things that the kids and the principal told me, I literally had tears in my eyes listening. I want to share this with the audience and we'll come back. I'm taking over, but watch.
Will Wilder changed the reading habits by making them want to read. He made them read. And he made them get it. And he gave them the power to believe that they can do it.
I like how the demons are trying to take over the world, and Will is on his way to stop the demons and to protect like all the relics that the demons are trying to get.
So they're Will Wilder. Like they become him. And the demons are their demons. Their demon could be a neighbor shooting. Their demon can be dodging bullets. Their demon could be alcoholic parents, or, I mean, that can be their demon. So even though it's mythical, it still gives you a hope that you can escape, right? That you can fight all of these demons and you can come out on top. You can be Will Wilder.
He adventurous, not scared of anything.
And I like how Will's adventurous spirit made him go and get the relics so he could find out more about it. But then when trouble started to happen, he fixed his own mistake, and I like how he did that.
You can conquer those demons. And I think that's why a lot of them like it.
This book is amazing and an adventure about the things that you can't do. And if you believe it enough, you can do it.
Will Wilder, he makes you escape from the real world. And he's a kid, so it's like, that could be me. I can save the world.
Right.
And they can, and it will. They will save the world.
That's an
your
unintended, this is an unintended consequence of the book.
Right.
I never thought that it would have that kind of value and touch lives the way it has. But it's been incredible. An incredible thing for me to watch.
So, such a gift to know how you're really impacting children right where they are, and I'm willing to bet that you've ruined many a bedtime with families saying, just one more chapter, one more chapter, let's keep going. I know from my own days of sharing stories with my children, the joy of going on an adventure as a family, but in today's world, a lot of our kids have screens in their faces. So what are some of your tips for parents who might be parents of reluctant readers? Because I feel like Will could be the person inviting them to rediscover the joy of a great book.
Well, what I love about it, and I've gotten so many letters and pictures of families who they had a reluctant reader in the house, and the Will Wilder series was really written initially for reluctant readers, particularly boys, who are the ones who, they're not much on the written word. So because it's an adventure series, because we have these incredible, I do love the covers. Jeff Nenthrop, who is the illustrator, did such a fantastic
And isn't it
job.
amazing to see your character come to life in that way?
I love it. And he has captured this kind of cinematic quality throughout the books. The interior art is just as compelling. And so kids are drawn to that. They want to go on that ride when they see it. And when they start reading it, the parents will read it with them, which I found fascinating. And then they have this conversation about their own family history and what these relics are. Is this real? Can I see this? Where is it? They go online together. And some of them are listening to the audiobook, too, on family trips.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I'm a huge fan of your audio narrations of these particular books. And I have to say, Raymond, that I know you not to be schizophrenic, but you voice your various characters with such convincing reality. And I know you have a few favorites. So how was it to kind of channel your inner Aunt Lucille, or your Bartimaeus, or your Tobias Chin?
Well, I was trained as an actor. So when I build a character, I do the same background and the same breakdown that I did as an actor. What is their intention, their background, where did they grow up, what do they do, vocal tics, all of that I'm very attentive to. So as I'm writing, I'm hearing the characters' voices.
I'm so glad to hear you say that.
Oh yeah, and I usually voice it as I'm editing, not when I'm writing so much as when I'm editing, because you're trying to make sure that voice is
and that it's as
up.
it's read aloud, that there's
works.
a certain cadence to the writing that flows.
Exactly, and you want that tonality. So, as I was telling you, I sometimes write at a Starbucks, and I'd be writing in the corner, and there was a woman who came in every afternoon, and she would look over, and you can feel when people are looking at you. And one day she came over, and after months of this, and she slid a card at the edge of my laptop, and she said, I don't mean to interrupt you, but are you hearing voices? And I said, well, yeah, I get paid for doing that. And I looked down at the card. She was a psychologist from Johns Hopkins. So I'm glad I actually had cover and I was writing, so it was okay.
The partnership with your publisher, with Crown Random House, this is a new adventure for you too. And how has it been to work with them and the resources that they're creating for young readers?
Their commitment, Crown Random House's commitment to Will Wilder has been truly the greatest publishing experience of my life. I mean, I've published, I don't know how many books, 7 books, 8 books now. Never have I had a team this devoted. And Barbara Marcus, who is the president of Random House, took Will Wilder to her heart at the very beginning. She wanted to publish this. And Barbara is an icon in the business. I mean, this is the woman who published The Babysitter's Club, the Goosebumps series at Scholastic, and she is the woman who discovered J.K. Rowling and published the Harry Potter series. So to be in her hands and to have Emily Easton, my editor, to have Phoebe Ye, my publisher at Crown, to be so supportive every step of the way. I mean, from marketing to final say on the covers, to input on everything. I mean, even the design, I mean, I can't rhapsodize enough. Even the design of the cover, just the hard book itself is so beautifully done. There's like this etching they put on the cover of the book. There's no attention to detail that they left unexplored, and they've been magnificent, really.
So as we, are ensconced in the season of Lent and really looking at our own devotional practices, I'm kind of curious what you think about how family story time and personal reading for kids can be part of their Lenten journey, and how perhaps Will Wilder might be a special part of this Lent in homes.
Well, part of what I discovered on school visits is kids, and you know this having written a series, kids love series. They want the story to go on.
Right.
And I think this time of year particularly is a time when we focus on this greatest story.
Yes.
It's important to let kids explore their own interests. And I think adventure stories, particularly those like Will Wilder, like the Time Travelers, they take children on a journey with characters that they can understand. It's a safe zone. It's also a place, certainly in my books, where good and evil do come into contact and vie. And I try to be true in a way that is a little scary around the edges. There are monsters and demons and things that pop up here. But I see correlations in the real world. I mean, we heard it from that principal, from Rosie Kendrick earlier. There are real world implications here. And as Aunt Lucille says in the second book, there are great wonders and great evils that, whether you acknowledge them or not, they're there, they're present. And all these characters in their own way begin to understand that. So I think sharing, not only other people's stories like ours, but sharing a family's journey is really important for children, and because they're fascinated by it. And we often don't stop and take that time. And what I love about the families who've read this series together is it's opened up that conversation. I had a Jewish mother last year write me and say, you know, we started talking, and my son asked me about his great-grandfather, who was a rabbi. And she started telling that whole background.
The lore of the family.
The whole lore of the family. And the kid was fascinated. He'd never heard this. So, you know, he said he calls himself Will now because, you know, there's this whole unexplored family history that was opened up to him. And it was because of the books. I love that. That's what I really want of this. Families to come together, to have an emotional experience, and that's what the books are designed to do, and to provoke questions and challenge them on certain levels. But this is a wild ride. In this book, the staff of Moses goes missing. Will is blamed for the missing staff.
Yes.
And before he knows it, this very strange soothsayer from Egypt has arrived in town, promising the world. And the plagues of the Old Testament start befalling the town. The clock is ticking against Will and his friends and his family, who have to discover not only the staff of Moses, who has it, but who's using it,
right,
and the identity of that person. So there are multiple mysteries. I always loved mysteries as a kid, so it kind of found its way out in this particular book.
And you're laying some mythology perhaps for future adventures. I can tell there are little hints that have been seeded into the book. So can you give us any hints about what might be to come next, or just that we should stay tuned?
There are a lot of setups here. The first book laid an awful lot of foundations. So there are clues in that first book that won't pay off until way down the line. But it's envisioned this will be a multi-book series. I'm working on book 3 now. I love going to Perilous Falls, but as you know, it's a lonely adventure too, because it's really you and, you know, the voices in your head. But I love it because what I do is after I finish a chapter, I'll read it to my children and their friends, and they give me instant feedback. So it's
and honest feedback.
Honest feedback, which I love, because they'll say that character's boring, I don't like that, why did you do that? That doesn't add up to the first book, you know. They'll catch me on things, and that is so important because I'd rather have it now than when I go on a school visit. So,
and I'm sure your readers everywhere will want to know, do you ever envision something screen-oriented for Will
We
Wilder?
are talking to some studios who are interested, and we'll see.
Come on, friends, let's make it happen.
We'll see.
How can readers find out more about the Will Wilder series, and specifically The Lost Staff of Wonders, Will Wilder 2?
They can go to my website, RaymondArroyo.com. It's available at Amazon, the EWTN Religious Catalog, Barnes & Noble, your independent bookstores, which need your support, really anywhere. You can get the book anywhere, but I love that it's a double book now, so it's a real series in the making. And you find a lot of kids who won't pick up a book if there's not a second.
And I recommend to young readers that they definitely grab both at the same time, because the minute you finish number 1, you're going to want to go right into the Lost Staff of Wonders.
Yeah, well, I see it in a lot of cliffhangers, so that you want to kind of, you want to keep, you know, I'm trying to raise a generation of page flippers. That's what I'm looking for, kids that really are immersed in the story. I believe if you give a child a story they want to read, they will read. And a practiced reader is a good reader, and that's what you're looking for. And you asked earlier about strategies to parents, and I didn't answer your question. Read to your children. Take them to the library and the bookstore. Let them select their own book. If they pick their own book, if they choose it, there's a 93% chance that they will read that book, as opposed to being given one. So it's good to direct them, but at the beginning of their reading adventure, let them select things they're interested in, whether it's horses or you know, castles or armies. Let them find their way. They will.
Well, on behalf of all of your readers, I thank you for the adventure that has been Will Wilder, and for all that's yet to come. I'm ready to grab my pet helmet.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to make you an honorary resident of Perilous Falls after all that.
Thank you.
Lisa.
And best of luck, and many prayers for what's to come in this series and with all of your work, Raymond.
Thank you. Will Wilder 2, The Lost Staff of Wonders, hits bookstores March 7th. I hope you'll get a copy for you and your family.